Jumping back into Teen Titans reviews, it's time to get into the final season of the show properly with the first main season episode, Trust. The two-part season premiere of this season may have introduced us to the threat that the Titans will have to face, that being the Brotherhood of Evil. But this episode introduces us to the formula that the rest of the season will roughly follow, highlighted by a chess game that we see the Brain and Mala playing in an early scene. The Brotherhood may have amassed a large force of young villains at the end of the previous episode, but they don't intend to go all out against the Titans until they have to, until they've weakened their enemy's position, so they're being subtle. They're making small plays, scheming against the Titans and trying to weaken them as much as they can. And their first move is to try to get their hands on a Titans communicator so that they can track Titans around the globe wherever they go. In fact, the Titan communicators, and I had forgotten this until I started watching this episode, are actually a major plot point for this season. They end up being a liability more than anything else, at least most of the time. And that all starts here in this episode, where the Brotherhood's plan basically goes off without a hitch. Because, obviously, they're not going to go after the core group. That's riskier. They're going to go after auxiliary members, honorary members, like characters that we saw back in that episode with the Tournament of Heroes, or whatever it was called. In fact, this episode opens on the character Wildebeest being taken by the Brotherhood, but his communicator is destroyed in the process, so they aren't able to actually get what they want from it. But since getting the communicator is his big first play, the Brain insists that happens. So he sends Madame Rouge after Hotspot, Madame Rouge being an assassin whose body became rubber after she ate the gum-gum fruit. That's a One Piece reference. I've been watching a lot of One Piece lately. It's not even really accurate. I'm just screwing around. Her power set's actually closer to the Liquid Terminator from T2. In fact, there's a scene in this episode that homages a scene from that movie. And because she has that specific power set, she's very difficult to harm, and she can shapeshift, but she's vulnerable to heat. It seems like it causes her body to lose its cohesion, and she liquefies. At least temporarily. She can pull herself back together. Now, I would imagine if you heated her up long enough, it would kill her, right? I'm just assuming. And because of that, when she confronts Hotspot, while his powers are on, he's very hot. And so it's too great a risk to try to touch him directly, so she turns into Robin. And so while the real Robin is investigating what happened to Wildebeest, Rouge is pretending to be him, trying to get him to either power down, so she can attack him directly in the time it would take him to power back up, or hand over his communicator. She even tried to goad him into taking the communicator out and when they first started fighting, so that she could try to steal it off of him. That is really her real goal here, after all. Taking Hotspot out of the picture, even just temporarily, would be a bonus on top of that. Which is why a couple of the choices that she makes throughout this episode really baffle me, but we'll get to that in a second. And she tries everything. Everything from the basic, why don't you power down to save your strength, to, hey, we need to go meet the other Titans. They're through this oil field that might blow up if you keep your powers on. And yet, because of the time crunch that the Brain has her under, she slips up a few times, which keeps Hotspot suspicious of her. And so when the real Robin does eventually show up to help, Hotspot doesn't trust him anymore, at least not at first. Though, it does seem like once he realizes that the real Robin is there, he relaxes a bit, because after everything's said and done, Rouge is able to trick him again by turning into Robin again. Though, it's not the first choice that she makes in the episode, but the choice that she makes here is one of the choices that she makes that really baffles me, because she immediately reveals who she is. She has just had this big fight with Robin. She has incapacitated him, at least temporarily, and moved on to trying to get to Hotspot again, when again, her goal is the communicator, and Robin has one of those too. And he's incapacitated right now, so why didn't she just take his, right? But then, even though she took the time to turn into Robin, she reveals herself immediately, leading to a big fight between her and Hotspot here at the end of the episode, when we already know that she considers it too big a risk to fight him directly. It just seems very silly. Because again, I get why he might be fooled by the Robin disguise again. It's Robin. Robin's kind of a legend to these other characters, even though Hotspot says throughout the episode that he's not really the kind of person to work with a team, he still has a lot of respect for Robin. You can really tell. Like, he says at one point that he likes being an honorary Titan even if he doesn't really call on them ever. So I get him letting his guard down when he finally realizes that the real Robin is there and has seemingly won. And so even though the fight between Hotspot and Rouge at the end of this episode is a really visually dynamic fight that was really exciting, considering that Rouge manages to capture him anyway, and then take his form to trick Robin into handing over his communicator, and so she gets the communicator in the end anyway, I really do feel like it would have been way more in character for her, as this supposedly legendary, tricky assassin, to use the disguise to get close, and then finally incapacitate Hotspot, preferably off screen so we could jump immediately to him emerging from somewhere, probably not rubble in this scenario like he does in the actual episode, but from somewhere, and then tricking Robin like in the episode proper. And I get if they had done it my way, they would have lost out on the chance to really spotlight Hotspot, pun, and show off what he can do, show off how powerful he can be. But there's some intra-episode inconsistency here. Like earlier in the episode where it would have been prudent for Hotspot to fly away, specifically when Rouge was first chasing him, and then later when he thought the Titans were on the other side of an oil field and didn't want to walk through the oil field. Here in this fight at the end, he's flying all over the place, and it feels inconsistent. If he can fly this freely, why didn't he just do that earlier? And also, why, once he's trying to escape Rouge by flying finally, doesn't he just fly super high up, where she can't get to him? Why does he keep flying between relatively low buildings that she can swing at him from? And then also here, despite her being super cautious about it the entire time, she's grabbing at him and dragging him around and throwing him, touching him directly when that's a thing that she didn't want to do prior to this. And it's not like she's shown getting more desperate, like her time crunch is really becoming a big deal. It really does feel like she's being just as hasty as she had through the entire episode, but something has changed and now she feels okay touching this person who she couldn't touch earlier, who she thought was too great a risk to touch earlier. Did she just get used to the heat or something? Because that's not usually how like molecular stability works, and I'm assuming the heat's just bad for her molecular stability or something, right? It's goofy, and like they would have had to fill that couple of minutes that the fight took up with something, but I feel like the episode would have been stronger without it, even though it did look really cool. And I also don't understand, I really do not understand why when she got Hotspot's communicator for a second, she didn't just super stretch herself away. Like again, capturing Hotspot was probably on the list, but like, clearly it would have been more of a bonus kind of thing. The communicator was the priority. So why did she stand there and open it up and call Robin, who did not know up until that point that Hotspot was in trouble? Why? Was she trying to capture Robin too? Clearly that's like endgame stuff for the Brain's plan. Why would she do that? It was idiotic on her part. Like, you could argue that she wanted a backup communicator, but like, she had the communicator, and it's only because she stands there and wastes time that Hotspot's able to get it back and destroy it, necessitating that she get a different communicator. I also straight up don't understand why she would go for her usual kill move. Her usual kill move seems to be absorbing her opponent into her body and suffocating them. Why would she go for that kill move when she's fighting Hotspot, when she knows he can turn his powers back on? Why not just super stretch her arms and like, I mean, this is gruesome, right? But like snap his neck or something? Like, I get that this is a cartoon, but absorbing him into her body and suffocating him is pretty metal for a cartoon too, right? She was clearly trying to kill the guy, or at the very least suffocate him to the point that it knocks him out so she can capture him. And I'm just saying, for somebody who her entire deal with him up to this point is that she doesn't want to stay close to him any longer than she has to, there are other ways to accomplish either a lethal or a non-lethal version of this thing, aside from doing the one thing that would give him an advantage over her for the first time in like the whole episode up to that point. Overall, she's a cool character. She's very confident in herself, and that makes her pretty fun to watch. And it's not like she's not skilled and strong. She is skilled enough to return Robin's robin rangs, or whatever they're called, birdarangs. Are they called birdarangs? Quickly enough that he's more likely to be harmed by them than she is. And she can more than keep up with him in hand-to-hand. So she's threatening. She's an interesting, threatening character, but she makes some really dumb mistakes here that make it hard for me to take her seriously. And yet, at the end, she wins. And she did manage to trick Hotspot for a very long time by carefully skirting a line where she seemed a little suspicious, but not suspicious enough to actively trip him up. Even though she had already told him earlier that she can be whatever she wants, implying that she's a shapeshifter. Like, frankly, she's a little too suspicious even, I think. Like, Hotspot had reason enough to be suspicious just because she was being weird. They didn't have to drop in other hints. It really feels like the writers tossed Hotspot the idiot ball for a while this episode, which is never a good look for a character you're trying to showcase. But it is really cool that we get to check in with this character again. We get to see him in his element, being a hero in Morocco. We get to see him in his powered down form, which I'm pretty sure we hadn't seen up to that point, so that was pretty cool. And basically that's going to be the main draw of this season, aside from the fact that the Brotherhood are a pretty different kind of threat than what the Titans have faced before, because they're manipulative and scheming like Slade, but there's a whole bunch of them, which is interesting. But the main draw of this season is going to be seeing other Titans characters, this show's version of other Titans characters, some for the first time and some in detail for the first time, and really getting to know them in little spotlight episodes like this. And seeing how the Titans in the comics and in the show are basically a found family thing, it's kind of like getting to spend time with the Titans' extended family, really for the first time, and that's a treat. So even if these episodes are going to be a little uneven like this, where it feels like the villains are dumb as often as they're smart, I can get past it. Because at the end of the day, Rouge is an interesting character and Hotspot is an interesting character, and I enjoyed spending time with them in this episode. I really do wish that Raven and Beast Boy and Cyborg had gotten to do anything at all in this episode, aside from stand around and look like they were zombies in a communicator screen shot. But whatever, it's fine. I know there was some weirdness behind the production of this season. It's possible they just didn't even have the voice actors on hand at all when they were making this one. And I totally get that. In fact, I'm pretty sure I remember reading that they just straight up didn't have all the voice actors together sometimes when they were making this one, because production kind of had to be rushed. Still, this is an enjoyable episode. It feels different than past Teen Titans episodes, and yet is still solid. So I'm happy it got made. As per usual, though, guys, I'd like to know, what do you think of the Teen Titans episode Trust, if you have seen it? Let's get a discussion going in the comments section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video, share it with anyone else you think would enjoy my content, and subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out my social medias and my Patreon. Links to those will be in the video description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.